Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the School of Tomorrow event, Negotiating a Better Future. My name is Lawrence Burke, and I'm Chief Education Advisor for the Beacon House Group, and I'm your moderator for this session today. I thank you for joining us all, and I'd like to thank the Beacon House Group, in particular, our chairperson, Mrs. Nazarene Kasuri, our Chief Executive, Mr. Kasim Kasuri, and our Executive Director, Mr. Nasser Kasuri, for their vision in developing and promoting the School of Tomorrow event series. In addition, I would like to thank the sponsor for this event, UBL Bank Pakistan. To everybody who's joining us in this session, you'll see at the bottom of your screen a question button. And so as we move through the discussion, please feel free to ask questions, and we will at some point be able to address them for you. This session, we're looking at transformative values and new competencies, and it's based on the idea that in the current health crisis, the World Health Organization has called for global cooperation, yet nation states or some nation states seem to be responding to this crisis unilaterally. This has heightened a pre-existing conflict of values and highlighted a lack of competencies in managing the crisis. Is it time for a rethinking of values and a rethinking of the necessary competencies which will sustain us through not only this crisis, but any future crises, and lay the foundation for a new global knowledge society? Joining me to share their expertise and insights into this conundrum, I have with me four experienced expertise in their areas. I would like to warmly welcome Dr. Tristian Stobie. Tristian is the Director for Curriculum and Qualifications Development at Cambridge Assessment International Education. A very warm welcome, Tristian. We have with us from New York City, very early in the morning, Ms. Cynthia Gaia. Cynthia is the founding executive director of the Global Dignity Foundation, and Global Dignity serves 1.1 million children in over 80 countries, and Beacon House is very proud to be a partner with Global Dignity. We have with us too the esteemed Dr. Umar Saif. Umar is the CEO of Survey Auto. He's also the Chief Digital Officer of the Jang Group and also the Chief Investment Officer of Kurdi Ventures. It's very nice to have you with us, Umar. And last but not least, we have the esteemed Mr. Vikas Pota. Vikas is an honorary lecturer at the UCL Institute of Education in the United Kingdom, and he's an expert on international education and the use of technologies to improve teaching and learning. And Vikas was also the inspiration behind the Global Teacher Prize, and Vikas is joining us from London. So a very warm welcome to you all. Tristian, let me begin by asking you a question. So what are the lessons to be learned as we endure this terrible pandemic? And do you think there's a need to re-examine our values and competencies in education?
Good morning. I think the lessons to be learned are clear. The importance of recognizing how interdependent we are as communities and societies, that no nation or no person can be an island. Therefore, actions in one place have significant repercussions around the world. We need to recognize the fact that we have some serious trade-offs between short-term financial gains and long-term sustainability. And it's not, of course, just the COVID crisis where this is paramount, but climate change is an issue. It is probably the greatest challenge we face as the human species in the future. The degree with which society is inequitable and relative and absolute poverty as real problems that lead to other problems like migration and pressures on resources are critical to engage with. And the fact that I'm afraid many people are willfully blind, that we can see on social media, simply ignoring the problems, hoping it will go away, seems to be a reaction that many people have. So those are some of the challenges. and the lessons to be learned from the crisis. The second part of your question was, do we need to re-examine values and competencies in education? Well, the short answer is yes, but I would point out that many schools, school systems, teachers already do emphasize broader competencies. They understand that the importance of a broad and balanced curriculum, and that education is much more than acquiring a series of qualifications. However, education by and large reflects the communities and societies in which it works. So the bigger questions have to go to policymakers, to national authorities, to really understand that they need to reframe the mission of schools somewhat from simply gathering qualifications towards developing broader competencies. But I want to say something else, because you hear a lot about the fact that knowledge isn't important anymore. I want to stress the opposite. I think powerful knowledge is more important than ever, because one of the greatest challenges is misinformation in our post-truth world, where individuals essentially convince others using false information and alternative truths. And the power of education as an antidote to this cannot be overemphasized. It's really, really important that citizens learn to distinguish fact from falsehood, that they understand, for example, science and what the scientific method is and what evidence looks like. And therefore, knowledge is more important than ever, but it's knowledge based upon deep understanding, not simple coverage. And therefore, I think it's really, really important that we emphasize education, but we also emphasize traditional disciplinary knowledge. Interdisciplinary understanding and broader competencies need to be based upon that as a foundation.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Tristian, because I think even though we promote critical thinking within the curriculum and so on, there's a lack of it. There's a lack of really promoting reason and to be able to sort of discern the huge disinformation that's around. So I think that's a very, very important point that you raised. Cynthia, I wonder if we could just sort of turn to you in terms of just following on from Tristian's point about sort of values and education. You know, you're leading an incredible organization, the Global Dignity Foundation, and we've worked with you extensively, and one of the key aspects of your organization is your vision. A vision of a world where compassion, understanding, and love triumph. How are we doing today, Cynthia, with this, from your experience? Yeah.
Well, I think there's before COVID, I think there was a groundswell in communities around the world. We're in 80 countries now. Many of our leaders work in schools and classrooms, so they're teachers, they're parents, they're school leaders. But we also have a huge amount of people working outside of formal school systems, in community-based youth groups, in refugee camps, where there are no place that we call school for, I don't know, something like 156 million children are not in the place we call school. So we see a groundswell of people who realize that in order to build the kind of communities we want that are just and safe and peaceful and more fair economically, and dealing with climate and the big challenges that face every community on the earth, that we need to dig deeper on sort of what the worldview that young people come into the world at 17 or 18 prepared to deal with. And I think we see less leadership, as Dr. Stobie just said, from ministers of education around these issues. From our perspective, it's more grassroots, a school here, a school there, a youth group, a network of teachers, a network of parents who are really searching for new models. But I think that COVID, because it has made us all feel interconnected and it has exposed the long-standing problems of inequality and also intolerance. A lot of our work is on how young people perceive others. This notion of everyone is born with dignity, and we need to do a lot of personal work as we're growing up and as we're adults around our own dignity and our own sense of agency and purpose, but also how we perceive others. And I think when you look at this interdependent global world that we now have a shock to the system and realize we're in one community on this planet, you can't get away from the differences in cultures and religions and backgrounds, and that we need to do a lot of work with young people in schools and out of schools around understanding and accepting differences, and that everyone is born with dignity and everyone has, enormous potential. So I would say for us, we see acceleration of people thinking about values and thinking about it all starts with values, and that the problems that we all face are kind of staring us in the face. I think less we see systems aligned, national school systems aligned to these values, but everyone's having the conversation. There's this moment of pause, and there's a moment of thinking about the reset. And as the World Economic Forum, where we were born and birthed, is saying that in order to have this reset, you need a mindset change. And that's all about values.
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia. Umar, I wonder if you could come in on this, because there seems to be this sort of conflict of values when it comes to technology in the digital world and social platforms. What are your thoughts on this in terms of a vision where we can have more dignity across the world, but more dignity in how people are treated through using technology and digital technologies and social platforms?
Well, thank you for that question. But even before I answer this, I think there are also broader issues with access to or lack of access to technology, especially in the context of COVID and going forward the way things are evolving so quickly in how people learn or work or entertain themselves. And I think an important point that I wanted to highlight as part of this conference is that typically technology is viewed as a vehicle to extend the classroom to students, let's say, who want to learn remotely or learn flexibly. Now, with COVID-19, it has finally dawned upon people like me, at least, that technology is not there just to extend the classroom, but we must be prepared to reimagine the classroom. And I'm not sure whether technology is there yet, or whether people have really embraced this new world where I think learning models, what a classroom means, what a school means, what learning means, is fundamentally changing. You can perhaps replace a a lecturing experience with a lecturer lecturing on a Zoom session to a class of 60-odd kids. But but how do you reimagine what else happens in a classroom? I don't know whether people even sat down to dissect what a classroom even means. It's much more than one person lecturing about 60-odd people in that classroom. I think some of that is beginning to happen, at least in the higher education space, where I believe it's actually easier rather than in school education, which is a lot more challenging, a lot more profound. These are the formative years for students, and there's a lot more going in a classroom than just soaking up content from a lecture speaking for about 60-odd minutes. So I think we need to reimagine what a classroom is. We need to reimagine what education is, how people learn, and how technology can or cannot enable that at this point in time. I don't think technology is there yet, and I don't think our learning models have evolved to fully embrace what confronts us. So that's the broader point I wanted to make. I think the second point is just access to technology to be able to participate in learning remotely, which is inevitable at this point in time. I was just reading on Twitter a few days ago that students in Gilgit-Baltistan in Pakistan, which is a remote area, a low-income area with very little technology infrastructure, are just not able to connect to the universities and schools because they don't have devices or network connectivity to even participate. This kind of marginalizes them in ways that had not been imagined before. A lot of people would have assumed access to a smartphone or internet connection is essentially access to entertainment and perhaps information. But this now takes away a fundamental right of learning and participating in education environments, and that I think is much more profound and something that requires immediate attention. This digital divide is taking away sort of this fundamental right to be able to learn, to educate oneself, and it's no longer possible in this circumstance. And number three, I think, of course, everyone has right to dignity. What that means in this environment, again, in this sort of digitally enabled world, is that while people have access to better and better technology, they'll be more equipped to participate with dignity in learning, in employment, in their daily lives than people who don't have access to technology. And in countries like Pakistan, where there's a huge digital divide, I think it's going to be a huge challenge. And the politicians, the government, entrepreneurs all need to pay attention to the enormity of the challenge in countries like Pakistan, given a pandemic like COVID, and perhaps what the future holds now for us in terms of both education but also livelihoods and how people earn income and seek employment or associate with short-term, maybe freelancing, gig-based economy. I think these are sort of fundamental questions beyond maybe using technology to be able to participate in a video conference for learning or for reconnecting with your colleagues in the work environment if you're working from home. I think this needs to be fundamentally reimagined on what the future holds for us.
Okay, thanks very much, Umar. Vikas, I'm going to ask you if you could come in here, but I'd just like to start with a quote from one of the speakers earlier today in a session. Professor Terandrabi said, "It's the education and the tech, not the tech in the education, which is important." What are your thoughts on that, and how would you respond to some of the points that Umar has raised? Thanks, Vikas.
Thanks a lot, Lawrence. I start off by saying thank you to the Kasuri family and the Beacon House family for inviting me to this interaction. Lawrence, it wasn't so long ago that I hosted a large conference with the title of "How do we prepare young people for the future of 2030?" And this was in 2018, actually, 2 years ago. And the reason why we chose 2030 was that when we often have a discussion on school of tomorrow or what the future holds, it often becomes a very abstract discussion in terms of, Elon Musk is saying, 2050, this is what's going to happen, or the trends are saying this is what's going to happen by the end of this century. Actually, 2030 was at that point 12 years away. And that is normally the tenure of a student entering a school at kindergarten to year 12. And so by the time that child actually goes through the school system, what is it that we expect and how is it that we prepare them for the world that they're about to enter? What was really interesting about this conversation was that no one was willing to take a punt as to what that future in 12 years' time would be. And this was before COVID. What has happened is COVID has accelerated a number of these trends. And if you were to ask, what does 10 years down the line look like? I could guarantee you no future gazer, no one will be able to tell us what that is. So if we see the purpose of school to a degree to equip children with skills to enter the world of work, well, what does that world of work actually look like today? And that is the real question, I think, that needs to be addressed. My personal view is that all this navel gazing when it comes to school of the tomorrow kind of conversations actually is shaped by the structure of society. And so, for absolute ages and ages, we've had this rather academic discussion in terms of how the school of the future is going to evolve. Actually, when the structure of society changes, the way we consume society changes, you will see those impacts on our school structures as well, is my view. And so let's not worry about what happens, for the school of the tomorrow. That will take care of itself with the advent of technology. And what we're seeing now, like you rightly mentioned, because of COVID, is the acceleration of the use of technologies in trying to make sure there's some continuity in education. So I have a few comments regarding the specific question you asked me. It wasn't so long ago, again, that the OECD published a report on the use of ICT in education. And in there was quite a actually jaw-dropping observation that they made. And this was at a time where technology wasn't really being seen as mainstream as a subject of, at least how it is today. And what they showed was that despite the large tech companies being out there and really creating markets out of schools and the sector, there was no evidence whatsoever about learning outcomes improving in schools as a result of these technologies. I would fast forward to today's situation. And the thing that we have to guard against is exactly that. You have technologists who will sell us almost anything because it's shiny, because it's faster, because it has that much appeal. But ask them the question, does it actually work? And they are unable, apart from anecdotal evidence, to provide us, well, actually, yes, it does improve learning outcomes. And so that is the challenge that I put, I would want every single student, every single family, every single school to put in front of anyone who comes to sell them wares that are technological. So that's one set of observations that I make. The second are all to do with this narrative that's been built around the teaching profession in particular. And so what we have is a situation where often teachers are referred to as lazy and absent. And that is primarily because they're seen also as obstructionists when it comes to the use of technologies in our schooling systems. Let me just tell you, from my experience, I don't think that is necessarily the case. What is required, however, and what we need to be a lot better at, is equipping our teacher workforce with the right skills to actually use and incorporate technologies in their teaching, so that they're able to firstly relieve their workload that exists. Just to give you an example, if you look at lesson planning, which is a critical activity that teachers have to do, on average, at least in the UK, a teacher spends anywhere between 1 and 3 hours an evening just lesson planning. And this is the same lessons that are taking place all over the world. And you just think, wow, technology can surely have a look at this in terms of how we can minimize the amount of time that's going in there and make them more productive, and actually they're able to shift their attention to the other aspects of their tasks in a classroom. So that's one example of how technology can help. But today, no one really goes and makes that claim, right? Everyone talks about, we're faster, we're shinier, come use us. You can do Zoom calls, you can do all these kind of things. But actually, what I'm interested in is how little Johnny over there is going to be learning more. I'll stop there. But my central point is we have to equip our teachers with the right skills and the right training to make sure that they succeed at the use of technologies in their classrooms.
Thanks very much, Vikas. Tristian, this is a good point for you to come in on here because it's raised some really, really key pertinent issues. So do you want to respond to some of this, but particularly about teaching and teachers, and teachers often being seen as the obstructionists in the involvement of technology in education?
Well, I think we've learned a lot about good teaching and learning practice in recent years, which is research-based. And those principles and practices are true online and face-to-face. We know, for example, the critical importance of teachers helping students develop their understanding in the proximal zone of development, so challenging students' thinking, making students think hard about things that matter, and therefore the teacher as a leader of learning rather than just a facilitator of learning. The critical importance of rich formative feedback. Now, technology can support these things, but it's only a tool. And so it's really, really important that whether it be face-to-face or whether it be technology enhanced and enabled, that the basic facts about how humans learn are understood and respected by teachers. Another thing I think is increasingly critical, it's always been important, is having metacognition, thinking about thinking, or as Chris Watkins talks about, the process of learning at the very heart, making learning an object of learning at the very heart of curriculum, so that teachers and learners reflect as they learn on the process of learning, so that they can understand failure and see it as a chance to progress, not as an obstacle. And I think that there are ways in which all schools, and the best schools already do this, but there are ways in which all schools and all teachers can put more emphasis on these things.
Okay, thanks, Tristian, for that. Cynthia, I'd like to come back to you because I think we live basically in an age where values-based education is very, very important. Within Beacon House, we have our own values-based learner profile. Cambridge have their own values-based learner profile. The International Baccalaureate does. We hear Bill Gates talk extensively about values-based education and how values should inform people's behaviour when they use social media. How do you see values, and particularly the values of global dignity, being practiced in an age of in the digital age and on social platforms?
Well, before I get to the digital age, I think we're in a great time of experimentation where I think everyone from the Aga Khan Foundation, with their rethinking what education for 2030 looks like with MIT, the Dalai Lama has a project with Emory University that's trying to do the same thing. How do you teach values, knowing that in the past, this issue of religion and values has stumped a lot of people. So how do you teach values in a non-religious way that gets to the heart of what we're all talking about, training this next generation of young people to go out into the world and be able to deal with massive inequality in our societies, the climate issue, so much hate and conflict around the world. And when I first took this job 3 years ago, people in the education world kept saying to me, well, you can't teach values. That's not the role of schools. And, you know, for us, the guiding sort of mantra is Nelson Mandela, who said, no one is born to hate because of their skin color or their religion or their background. They are taught to hate. And if they can be taught to hate, they can be taught to love. So how, I think in various places around the world, including Beacon House, people are trying to figure out from the 5-year-olds or even kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, the 3 and 4-year-olds, all the way up to graduation through universities, how is it that you build a curriculum and content that teaches values in a non-religious way, so that when kids graduate, they have a sense of global citizenship, they have a sense of their own sense of agency and purpose in life, that they, back to this question of where does hate come from, and we're seeing this in America right now on steroids, that COVID, yes, we're all in it together. Anyone from any background can get COVID. It's serious, and it's making us think about interdependence and a global community, but in very real ways, we're seeing in every society, certainly here in the United States, how it differentiates. If you're poor or if you're in a community of color, it's hitting you 3 times as hard as if you're in a privileged community in America. And I think this will bear out over time in the next year in most societies. So I think there's this whole movement of social and emotional learning where people have been trying to create that K through 12 curriculum and sequence. And then there's this whole new movement that I think is blossoming because of the inequities that we're seeing through COVID about social justice. If we want to make the world kinder and more peaceful and less conflict and take care of our natural resources and our planet, and have more just economies and elect better leaders, then we need the next generation to be thinking about these values that we call global citizenship and a sense of their own role and their own purpose in making their communities and that world that we all want to live in. So I think it's a work in progress. And I think I've been on 10, 20 webinars in the last 2 months, including Vikas's fabulous one with 100,000 teachers, where people are all thinking about what this new curriculum and content looks like and sharing a lot of ideas. But I think we're in the early stages. You know, Ken Robinson gave that great talk, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago now, on how we need to rethink education and rethink schooling for the next generation. And we're still at the early stages of figuring out what that looks like.
Okay, thanks very much, Cynthia. Dr. Umar, I want to bring you in here because I think the points that Cynthia is focused on are very, very important. In terms of a Pakistani context and in terms of your knowledge and understanding of education in Pakistan, the use of technologies in Pakistan, what are your views on the development of education in the country for the future? As you know, the government is looking at a uniform curriculum right across the whole country. It's going to impact private schools, public schools, madrasas. It's going to have a heavily digitalized component. In terms of values and in terms of futures thinking, what are your views and understanding of this development?
Before I answer that, I want to build upon what Cynthia just said. I think actually a school's purpose is largely to teach values and curiosity, and not as much to impart knowledge. You know, that's an extreme statement to make, but I think it's something to ponder. I remember I was in college, and you know, college moves very quickly in a quarter-based system, which is what we had in my undergrad college. And once I complained to one of my professors on how quickly the quarter unfolds and then winds up, and that we don't really learn anything in depth. And he sat me down and said, in college, you don't really learn anything. You just learn how to learn. And I think you can easily extend that to school also, where you basically learn how to learn. You're taught values and curiosity. And that's the job of a good teacher in a good school. And the statement about values is a very broad statement. And I think it reflects in countries and cultures and societies in interesting ways. And what we're seeing playing out in US, plays out in other countries also, perhaps not as well documented, but where values taught in school break down. You know, they show up in very ugly ways, in various forms and colors and intensity throughout the world. Now, having said this, I think I was involved in the school education reform in Punjab for a long time, from just mundane sort of administrative tasks of trying to account for schools, and in the process building a monitoring platform that ended up closing down about 8,500 ghost schools, so to speak, which did not actually exist, but existed on paper and ate up government resources, to digitizing all of our enrollment, where we found out that there was good about 1 million bogus enrollment of students, just so that we can show government that we are achieving the enrollment targets set up artificially to try and meet up 25A in our constitution now, to detecting about 24,000 odd teachers who we couldn't locate anywhere in schools, but were on the government's payroll, to then digitizing all the textbooks from grade 1 to grade 12 now. And you may have seen some of that, given that you live in Pakistan, through e-learning platform. And when I was digitizing these textbooks and making them accessible over Android and iPhone apps and putting them in schools, etc., there was this discussion that Vikas has brought up, which is there any evidence to using technology to improve learning outcomes? And that was a question that haunted us. As a technologist, my solution to every problem was to somehow try and use technology and digitization to make things transparent and faster and more accessible. But in this case, we are confronted with this big question on how technology can improve learning outcomes. And in my previous life, I spent many years at MIT and had a ringside seat to the one laptop per child and one tablet per child being rolled out through large government grants and money. And there was essentially no documented evidence on how this was helping with learning outcomes. So when I took up this challenge in Punjab, we first digitized all the textbooks, then we trained all the teachers, and then we started producing lectures, and we produced about 15,000 of these. I set up a small studio close to where, in the Punjab IT board, where we would bring in teachers and subject matter experts, and they produced about 15,000 video lectures. Then we produced cartoons and animations and simulations and games and started linking that up into government textbooks and so on. But the question was, can we measure this? So that's when we partnered with a professor at the time at University of Delaware, Sabrine Bake, and her team, and they ran an RCT, I think funded by JPAL, in 60 schools in Punjab, where we chose 60 schools as control and 60 as treatment, and measured their learning outcomes, student learning outcomes for over a year, including the government standardized testing, which is the PEC examinations. And we found that in science and math, where we did the intervention using all this technology, pre-canned content and delivery, training of teachers, but also critically scripting of what happens in a classroom, so that we have some control over uniform sort of usage of technology and what role teacher plays and when and so on. So we scripted or choreographed or orchestrated what happens in a classroom using technology. The evidence is actually quite eye-opening. In fact, I remember meeting with Sabrine, who was a professor at Delaware, had just completed a PhD at Cornell. She came and challenged me and said, you're doing all of this and putting up these screens in classrooms and giving tablets to teachers and digitizing all this curriculum, and there's essentially no published evidence that any of that helps. So before scaling it up, we ran this RCT, and Sabrine and I were both pleasantly surprised with the results that we got a year later, which have now been published in this UNBUR, National Bureau of Economic Research working paper. It's about 41-page paper. I would encourage people interested in this to go through some of this, where we essentially found that the student test scores improved by 120% for maths and 52% for science. And this is grade 8 in Punjab. So this was sort of the first sort of big documented evidence on a real RCT that was run in about 120 odd schools, half control, half treatment, with using technology, pre-canned digital content, some mode of delivery like a screen in a classroom, tablets for teachers to be able to see the lectures and the content before they could deliver it in the classroom, and critically then scripting how they use technology and what defines their role and how do they interact with students and use the pre-canned content. All of that had to come together in a delicate balance and really in a very controlled environment for it to show the kind of results that we wanted to get. Just giving students tablets or laptops or putting screens in classrooms or, God forbid, whiteboards doesn't quite really generate the kind of results that one would imagine they would. And we were getting all sorts of sort of crazy proposals on people from other countries hooking up to schools in Punjab to give live lectures. None of that really works. We all like to believe that it does because it's fancy, it's shiny, as Vikas said. These smart boards are nice to play around with, and they can show great content and you can interact with them, So it's important to really sort of understand this. So people who are interested in this, I think that UNBUR paper that Sabrine and the team and myself and others finally put together good about 3 years of work to do some evidence, some academic evidence on what works and what doesn't. So that's the other part. And then finally, I want to be able to say that I think governments sort of this movement within Pakistan and sort of a simmering sentiment. It hasn't really come to fruition, but a simmering sentiment to somehow make education a level playing field by having a standardized uniform curriculum. Now, this is also easily said than done, and you can't really engage in this discussion superficially It can't be political rhetoric. It can't really be it can't be a political narrative. This really has to be thought through. And I think the private schools, largely tied to external boards of examination, have played a critical role in keeping our education system afloat in the absence of what state has been able to do for its citizens. And that, I think, needs to be again thought through and understood very carefully. In Punjab, we had 53,000 government schools, and in my time, and one of my favorite projects was actually also Qasim was involved, who was in Beacon House. And I remember I had this meeting set up in my office where I brought in all the education department folks and said, let's outsource our 10,000 schools. And these were schools that had a 0% pass percentage for tech examinations, out of which I could only outsource 4,700 of those. The argument was, well, with all the resources and might and energy that government is pouring or not, we couldn't get a single student in these 4,700 schools to pass a government's standardized examination. So let's give it out to private sector. And 1 year later, we had tripled the enrollment in these schools, and the pass rate went up to 58%. So I think while all these political narratives and all these political rhetoric are welcome, and it's a laudable sentiment to make education a level playing field in this country and bring in a uniform curriculum, it needs to be really thought through in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. Are we going to crowd out or elbow out the private sector? Are we going to invite them to participate in this, and how? And what curriculum do we bring forward? Now, and I want to close by saying this, and I apologize if I've really hogged airspace for much longer than I should have. You struck a chord with this public sector education problem, which I've grappled with for many years. I think the important bit there also is that it's important to realize that Pakistan doesn't have a curriculum-based education system. We have a textbook-based curriculum. We have a textbook-based education system, which means that the government does not publish a curriculum. The government publishes standardized textbooks. The examinations that are set on these standardized textbooks, and the grades are given on how well you cram and memorize these standardized textbooks. The government doesn't publish a curriculum and lets you choose a textbook or a mode of education or student learning outcomes based on what you deem fit. The government actually prescribes your textbook. You cram that textbook. The examinations are set on that textbooks and given on that textbook and marked on those textbooks. So while having a standardized uniform curriculum is a great thing to aspire to, we first need to have a curriculum in the country, leaving it for schools and educators to choose the best mode, medium, pedagogy, and enablement to achieve learning outcomes based on that curriculum. I'll stop and I can go on for days on this.
Well, I tell you what, it's a conversation that we must pick up with you at another time. I think the points you've made are so relevant, so pertinent. We've got some fantastic questions coming through. And Vikas, I'd like to ask you this question. Why is technology expected to improve learning outcomes when it's just another tool like a pen or a book, more vast though, and not a curriculum? Why are we assessing a fish on its ability to climb?
I think that's a fantastic question, and I couldn't agree with it more. Actually, over the last decade or so, where I've been involved in education very deeply, I would say to you that the realization that I have had is in the centrality of teachers. And the funny thing is that, I live in Northwest London. Let me just explain. Every night we sit here having dinner with our kids, and the habit normally is to run down the teacher or the school and just say how bad a job they're doing. We do need to turn that conversation the other way, because actually, and what COVID has shown us, because of our own real experiences with homeschooling, is that teaching is a profession. It's not just any other occupation. There are professional standards attached to it, and teachers go through training for a reason in many parts of the world. And so I would say to you that I agree with that comment. And I'd rather, if I had a finite pool of money, I would rather invest the resource in making sure we get the best and the brightest to consider teaching as an attractive profession, and then to invest in their capabilities, because all research demonstrates that the biggest lever of change that we have in any education system is the capacity of the teacher workforce. I hope that answers the question. And so, the thing that really concerns me is the learning loss that has happened over this period. Umar speaks about Pakistan. I can tell you a few stories from what is considered a G7 country, which is the UK, and the enormous challenges that we have faced with inequities rising because of a lack of hardware, data, connectivity, the inability for teachers to do their jobs online. It's a fallacy to think that the switch happened like this and everyone was all of a sudden being schooled effectively from home. I know from my own experience of having two daughters who are schooling, that is nowhere near the case. What we do need to focus on, and I'm reminded time and time again, is actually, how do we catch up? How do we play catch up? And there are many experiments now around the world that are starting up saying, okay, how do we make up for this learning loss that's happened? And in there, I do think technology can help us accelerate. Actually, one of the things that we haven't spoken about with regards to the power of technology is its ability to personalize. And that itself, by the way, is a massively ideological point when it comes to, say, the British government and its approach to technology. And so I'd say to you that, the question is absolutely correct. I would rather focus on the training and equipping of teachers to do their jobs a lot better, but recognize that teaching technology is a tool that we can achieve humongous stride, lots of progress in, and to make sure that we keep focused on that. The last point I'd like to make, again, comes to the point about technologists. So the people that actually have these startups and these companies, and they often go school to school by selling either their learning management platform or a new numeracy program or new language learning app or things like that. The question and over a period of time, I must have met at least around 500 such startup entrepreneurs, either looking to raise money or trying to sell me something. And the question I ask them is, what experience do they have of standing in front of a class and teaching? And you will see 95% of them just fall away. Teaching is a science. There's a lot of science applied to learning. And so what I would ask for all these technologists to think about is, getting some experience. And if in their startup team, they don't have someone who stood at the front of a classroom, I'd really encourage them to incorporate such an individual, because I think through there will come a lot of thinking in terms of how they should shape their products and services.
Thank you so much, Vikas. Just Tristian, before I come to Cynthia, have you got a couple of comments on this? Are we still assessing a fish on its ability to climb? And what do you see in terms of the future in 12 years' time for education and assessment?
I think I agree with all of those comments, very much so indeed. I think nothing is more important. I know nothing is more important than the quality of teaching to enhance learning. It's one area where the research is quite clear. So putting resources into supporting better teaching is money well spent. Assessment can play an important role, but it needs to be high quality assessment. And the most important form of assessment is assessment that supports learning, not summative assessment. So constant ongoing assessment in order to understand where a child has misconceptions, for example, or doesn't understand something, can help the teacher change their teaching in order to correct or enhance that student's understanding. And this is critical. So I see adaptive testing in online environments as essentially the most important and valuable form of assessment that can be developed. Really good adaptive testing tools, which help students practice problems and questions until they find it difficult, and then help structure both directly through the platform itself or through informing the teacher where the misconceptions are. Next step teaching is really, really valuable. I think there will continue to be a role for high-stakes summative examinations as long as universities require them for entrance to universities. But I really hope and believe that those forms of assessment will become broader so that students, for example, are able to display through, for example, electronic portfolios and other forms of demonstration of what they're capable of doing that doesn't just involve an exam hall performance. So I think there will be an important role for assessment in the future.
Thank you so much, Tristian. Cynthia, if we just sort of come back to you before we move on with another question. Values and the values that are being currently challenged today, the values that have brought us to this terrible crisis, you know, competitiveness, the destruction of the environment, and we've seen it. We're seeing it all unfolding today. Do you think in the post-COVID world, do you think there's going to be a shift, a value shift? Do you think we're going to learn anything from a value-based framework to improve our lives, humanity in the future?
Well, I think we are. I think the world is having a giant conversation about values right now and what kind of world we want to live in, what kind of communities we want to live in. And young people are leading the way on issues like climate. You know, you have 11-year-olds who are saying, we want to have a future, we want to have a green planet, we want to have sustainable livelihoods, we want new kinds of economies. When 11-year-olds are leading the way, not necessarily out of schoolwork, but just out of their own set of values. Same thing we're having in America right now, and it's reverberating around the world around racial injustice and economic injustice. We all know what the problems of the world are, and they play themselves out in different ways in every society. But coming back to how you teach values in this new world, looking 10 years ahead, I have a couple comments. One, platforming off what Vikas said about how important teachers are. Just 2 points. I worked in education reform in some of America's biggest cities for the last 20 years. And by and large, teachers will tell you that this is the conversation they want to have about youth development, about purpose, around changing the world, around these issues of racial injustice. But if they're in a public school system, basically the curriculum that the United States of America is forcing every state and every district to adopt leaves teachers very little room to be creative around how do you integrate the social emotional learning and social justice and values education into their practice. So I think there's no silver bullet here. I think the world is pushing us to the place we call school or university has to be central to this set of values of what we want young people to leave, and that we are inheriting a system that has been biased on cramming content and facts. Some schools do that more than others. Some national curriculums do more of the old school model than others, but we're all inheriting a system that was built for another time and is not equipped to have this conversation. So I think the bright points are in networks like yours that have a little bit of freedom to innovate. Smaller countries like Costa Rica and Portugal, Finland, that are thinking about values and integrating them into national school systems in a coherent way, with a lot of teacher engagement in actually creating that sequencing and content. So as good as teachers might be, and as important as that focus is, what they're allowed to teach and how they're allowed to teach is like the twin issue here. And I just want to end by just saying a story that came out of Beacon House that Kasim told me when I first joined Global Dignity 3 years ago, and that you all had been teaching these values of dignity and tolerance and anti-bullying and a lot of the work that we do, you were doing before I arrived. And a group of teachers came to Qasim and said, you know, in the classroom, I think my second graders get it. They understand these concepts of dignity and human rights. When they leave the classroom, I watch them go to the people who are cleaning the bathrooms, serving the food, and they in the private schools in the cities, they were basically treating people like they weren't human beings, and that's inherited in the caste system in Pakistan. And he said, if we just, the teachers came and Qasim said, well, what are you going to do? And they said, well, we're going to bring those workers into the classroom to humanize their life story and have a conversation that sort of unmasks this division in our country that we are all living under. And magic happens. So there's this combination of what you teach, how you teach, teacher leadership that all matters, and it all has to work together. And as I said before, I think it's a work in progress, and probably the bright points that we have to look to are either small nation school systems where the nations already have these values and they want to figure out how to teach them in school, this place we call school, and do it systemically to scale, and innovative networks of schools like Beacon House that have the freedom to experiment and get teachers helping figure out how to do this, K through 12.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Okay, we've got about 4 minutes left, my dear friend panelists. So I'm going to ask you if you could just, as Cynthia just mentioned, it's about humanizing the story. And I've asked you just to take maybe sort of 40, 50 seconds and share the personal side of this pandemic with you, because it is a personal experience for all of us. I'm here in Pakistan as a New Zealander. I'm going through this experience outside of my country. I'm sure all of you are having a very personal story with this. Is there one thing that you would like to share with us, how you're managing in the pandemic? Because I'm sure people tuning in would be very keen to understand and get some insight in what it's been like for you. You can start, Tristian, if you like.
Yes, I was on mute. I think it's been eye-opening, as it has for everybody, because the way we work in Cambridge has changed, and we've been working remotely, and the effectiveness of collaboration remotely has surprised us all. We're able to do things highly effectively using the technology. So I think it's the word catalyst has been used earlier in the discussion. I think it's been a catalyst that's made people realize that actually we can change the way we work. And there are positive benefits too in terms of how personal relationships and downtime and silence can be valued as well.
Fantastic, thanks. Cynthia, just quickly, I'm just looking at the second clock and my session manager's waving furiously at me.
Well, I just feel like we're in this period of massive change, and that it's brought, this COVID experience has brought a lot of us together to sort of pause and rethink the way we're living and we're designing our institutions. And values are kind of at central to all of it. So it's an exciting time, although it's a time of great stress and sadness too, for me.
Thank you. So, Umar, for you?
Well, I really like what Tristian said, and I think that's very eloquent. But let me quickly add that we've been surprised both by what we are able to do that we thought we weren't able to do remotely, and also surprised by what we thought we were able to do remotely but are not able to do remotely. And as our work lives and our lives and family and all of that sort of comes together in this work from home, learn from home, entertainment from home comes together. I think we've all been surprised by what we were able to do using technology or not, and what we were not able to do, and must appreciate what also we were not able to do just remotely.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And finally, Vikas, from you, just a short comment on it. Yeah.
Because of the commonality of experience around the world that COVID has brought, and the absence of actually any thinking as to how we tackle such challenges, I think the thing that I've learned the most is that how every single individual has the ability to influence what happens in another part of the system, whether in their own country or in another. And so a teacher in Lahore has an equal chance of influencing what happens to a teacher in London. And I think that is the most incredible opportunity that we have to reform and shape how education is delivered.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Tristian, Umar, Cynthia, Vikas, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks to everybody who's tuned in, and thank you for your questions. And finally, I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to Beacon House for their vision and foresight in developing and creating this event. And a final word of thanks to UBL, Bank Pakistan, sponsoring this. UBL, the bank that cares. Thank you very much. And it's goodbye from Lahore, Pakistan. Stay safe and stay well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.